Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting for Tuesday, November the 14th, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. First item on the agenda, under agenda item 1.1, Land Acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Next item on the agenda, under agenda item 1.2, is Conflict of Interest Declaration, Pecuniary and Non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? None declared, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2.1, acceptance of the agenda for November 14th. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting agenda for November 14th, 2023 as presented? Councillor Pickering. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to adoption of the previous minutes. Under agenda item 3.1, we have the regular council meeting minutes from October 23rd, 2023. Were there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just maybe clarification and amendment to the minutes, including that of Councillor Saylor as recorded. After his swearing it, I would believe it would be Deputy Mayor. Is that correct?
Yes, so once he's sworn in, then he's referred to as Deputy Mayor, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And then so amendments to 8.2 moving forward. So I'll just make that amendment. I think our Lana can figure the rest out.
So let's just back up. So we're going to make the change on the minutes from October 23rd.
That's correct.
3.1,
yes. Yep.
So with that being said, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting minutes from October 23rd, 2023 as amended? Councillor Chapman makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Then we have our special council meeting minutes from October 23rd. I think that might be a typo too, because
just to further, I forgot to mention in the previous minutes, Deputy Mayor Beekman would have been changed, should be changed to Councillor. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Our municipal clerk will make those corrections.
Correct, thank you. Where did you notice the changes to be made in the other minutes?
Let me just confer with our municipal clerk. So we have two dates. Was that the organizational meeting? Okay, thank you. So then, are there any errors or omissions on the special council meeting of October 23rd, 2023? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the organizational council meeting minutes from October 23rd, 2023 as presented? Councillor Beekman makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then we have under agenda item 3.3, the special council meeting minutes from November 1st, 2023. I noticed there's one amendment to be made on the actual copy of that you have as a PDF. It still says regular council meeting, so we'll change that to special council meeting. Is there any other changes, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, then could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the special council meeting minutes from November 1st, 2023 as amended? Councillor Rees. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4.1, delegation by appointment. This afternoon, we have Dean Stepanic that's here to give us a presentation regarding community beautification recommendations. So Dean, if you wanted to come up to the presentation table there, please. And once you're all settled in, you can go ahead with your PowerPoint. And just while you're getting set up there too, as we previously discussed, as a delegation, we'd like to keep you within a 15-minute timeline, please.
Okay, Mayor Van Rijn, councillors, thank you very much for letting me have the opportunity to speak to you today. I wanted to just discuss some community concerns, some safety risks related to weeds and lost revenue, which leads to residential tax increases. Also, the land use bylaw in other communities and the concerns that maybe home builders have with it. And so I want to make sure that I cover that area, and then I want to offer some solution ideas. The picture above is just sort of common within the community. I'm sure you've driven around and seen some of these vacant lots. Some of the weeds at the back edge of that up against the fence are 4 feet tall. And the bottom picture, I apologize, is not very clear, but it's a lot, vacant lot next to my house. And on June 15th of this year, I went on vacation, and I thought prior to going, I'm going to call the bylaw enforcement team and just mention that it'd be nice if the weeds could get cut. They were about 1 foot tall at the time, and they covered the whole lot. And when I got back from holidays, the main part of the lot was mowed down, but the weeds up against my whole entire fence the whole way had grown to 4 feet tall. And so it was kind of my bad for maybe upsetting the landowner, but I did call back at the end of July and talked with the bylaw enforcement officer, and I kind of got the understanding that, you know, he's limited on his resources and what he can do for me. However, by the first week in September, those weeds did get cut down, and I think the message here is that I basically had to wait all summer. I had the whole summer where I had weeds next to my property up against my fence that were spreading onto my lawn, things like that. So my understanding that this has come to council in the past, and I think one of the safety concerns that I had was this lot is filled with foxtails, and I'm sure most of you are aware that they are dangerous for pets. The seeds blow around onto lawn, and dogs sniff that and they get it in their nose, and it's generally around a $3,000 vet bill to get to have that remedied. So also there's this was an interesting one, because not only do we do commercial herbicide spraying, but we also do some residential spraying that homeowners don't want it spreading to the lawn, so they take action. You can see in the top picture, there's a brown area where residents have to spray just to manage around their own lawn. But doing some research on this, I realized that there's actually kids playing on these vacant lots. And in the bottom picture, you can see that there's old boards and sticks. They're digging there, creating a ramp to play on, and they're playing on this somewhat contaminated land. And just so you know, the picture, these two pictures are the same lot. At different times, the pictures were taken. That's the front of the lot, and then the bottom picture is the back of the lot from the alley. But yeah, I think it's safety concern that should be addressed, and you can't see it, but there's an 8.5 by 11 sign at the front of this lot that says danger, it's been sprayed. But most of the children that I see playing there can't read that sign, and if they're old enough, they probably didn't notice it was there, and most times those signs blow away in the wind. They're just a piece of paper attached to it. There's snow removal. I've been living in the community for 4.5 years. I've cleared this sidewalk for the last 4.5 years. This year I'm turning 60, and I don't know if I'm going to be doing it anymore after this. And nor should I. But I've never seen a contractor come over and clean that. That's something that I've taken on the responsibility to clean it, and I think other people in the community have helped out as well. This slide was more for the public. I know, councillors, you know how this works. Manager brings an idea or however, though, if in this particular case, the subdivision is not completely developed and there's vacant lots left behind, and you move on to projection in future years to raise property tax to make up for those shortfalls. I did, working with your management teams, is that found out that they spend 50% of their budget, summer budget, as well as 62% of the calls coming in are related to unsightly properties. That's 116 calls per year. They're just related to unsightly properties. I'm not going to go over the details of the bylaw. I read it over several times. This is basically the information. I understand how it works. There's quite a few holes in there where the landowner can avoid not doing the weeds. And as I said in my presentation, I waited or preventing them to resolve the issue. This particular lot, I took this picture 3 years ago. So it's just not because of this since I've joined the community here. I did some research on land use bylaws in other communities, and the basics of it was that when they sell a piece of land, there's a development permit attached to it, and this permit lasts for 12 months. You can extend it if you wish, if you're a landowner, but you also have the opportunity to return it if you don't extend your permit. I think this is pretty restrictive, and this is not what I'm suggesting, but I'm offering a solution that's similar to this in my slides coming up, so I'll discuss that with you in a minute. I definitely want to make sure that we're aware of the home builder, the developer. It's important to have them in the community come and build a lot, so we need to address their concerns, and some of them might be with the economy turns bad after they purchase a lot, or maybe there's delays in the lot they're building a house on and they can't move to the next one in time. So I wanted to address those because I think they're important, and there should be some leeway and understanding for that as well, because they're an important part of the community. So one of the solutions that I'm suggesting is that if the town of Coaldale would include a development permit on the lot sale, make the permit 2 years in length. You could renew it every year. However, there'd be conditions on renewal, and one of them would be requesting the permit renewal before the expiry of the permit. No environmental storage or dumping occurring on the site. No more than one bylaw infraction on that property, and that's just to give some leeway if the contractor was busy and didn't get to clean up the lot in time. You wouldn't want to penalize them, having them return the lot just because of one violation, but it would set up some conditions for them, and then the lot could be returned if it was expired or infraction occurred. And you're going to ask me probably, well, what's the advantage to the town if we take a lot back that we sold? So I came up with a little example of what the advantage might be for the town. So in this example, just assume the lot cost $100,000. The lost tax revenue for every year that a house isn't developed is $4,000. And that's my assumption. I'm assuming that the residential tax on a developed property is around $5,000. and a vacant lot tax is around $1,000. So the current property we're referring to, some of them have been vacant for 5 years. So it really, to date, there's about a $20,000 loss on that lot for the town in that 5-year period. Whereas if you implemented a permit plan, like I suggested in the previous slide, the landowner could return the lot to the town, and after 3 years, the town could resell that lot at a higher market value. And so in summary, a $20,000 loss if you don't have the lot developed for 5 years, or a possibility of a $7,000 gain in market value. Now, I'm just guesstimating on the market price. We all know that 5 years ago, those lots were probably bought for $80,000, and currently they're selling for $150,000. So you could probably take my $7,000 and call it $70,000. I just wanted to make an example here of what's possible. And then, as we're all aware, there is one landowner that owns approximately 30 vacant lots within the community. So after 5 years, that's a $600,000 loss to the town. Other solutions might include snow removal and weed cleanup that's done by the town, or the town would hire a contractor to do it, and the developer would just pay that cost every year, and that would be worked into the lot price and discussed that would be a responsibility of the town. That way we're not chasing and spending valuable resources trying to get the lot cleaned up. So changing the bylaw, I think, is sort of another approach, rather than, if we just look at the doubling of taxes, that may not be enough of a tool to get the landowner to resolve some of the issues. So it's kind of clear that there's some holes in the bylaw, and if we provided the bylaw enforcement team the tools to act in a reasonable time, I think that would be more effective. I won't dwell on this next slide, other than the fact that the homeowners' market value is reduced when attempting to sell their property. And going back to my slide where I had those 4 feet weeds, can you imagine if I had my house for sale this summer, and a real estate agent had a couple clients in the back seat, and they drove up to my house, and the clients in the back seat would say, "Step on the gas, let's get out of here." So I think it does affect the market value of the property, and should be addressed. So in conclusion, after several attempts to resolve this unsightly problem, let's work together with the community to address lost revenue and the safety risks that has clearly been identified. Property values are being affected by the unsightly vacant lots, and residents and visitors clearly are taken back by the overlooked community. Let's act now. Thank you very much for allowing me to present. Is there any questions? Or?
Thank you, Dean. I really appreciate you putting this PowerPoint together. You and I have had several discussions about this, and I feel your pain when we drive around our community, but at the end of the day, the procedures that we have to follow are outlined in the bylaw, so you understand the steps that we have to go through. And the reason that I wanted you to come and present to council today is that at the end of this discussion, by way of resolution, we want to make change. So I'm hoping that we can direct our administration team to work on gaining our bylaw some more teeth and how to deal with these empty lots. And your presentation is very in-depth, and I don't want to get into the weeds, no pun intended, by discussing every line item you have here. And I'll open it up to council for any questions or comments, but I don't want to get into the meat and potatoes of Dean's presentation here. That's something that our administration team can be doing. So I'll open it up for questions, but at the end of that, I'm looking for someone to make a motion that council receive the update for information And further, that council direct administration to report back on the options available to address unsightly concerns on vacant lots in Coaldale. With that motion, that should capture your concerns, right, Dean? Okay, so at this time, I'll open up to members of council for any questions, comments to our presenter. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to our presenter, thank you so much for your presentation tonight and making our public via live stream aware of some of the concerns. And I really appreciate the fact that bylaw has received quite a number of calls for unsightly premises. That's really a positive gesture in the sense that many of the community realize that that bylaw reacts on complaint basis rather than trying to address every single one. So that's sometimes the case. Living in my cul-de-sac for 25 years, I've taken upon myself to be the snowblower person in the community, and so I appreciate the fact that you do take care of your neighbors and yourself. And just maybe from another observation point of view, that our town does have a snow angel program. So if we have residents who aren't able to take care of their snow removal, that we would certainly have the resources in a roundabout way to connect the dots and help some of these residents in the community who do need help legitimately for some of their needs in various ways. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Beekman has a question.
Thank you for your presentation, Dean. You may not know the answer to this one. Just for my own curiosity, when somebody came by to clean up the weeds, and in September you said, do you recall whether that was a Town of Coaldale vehicle or a private entity that came to do it?
My understanding that was a contracted service that came in and did the work.
Was it contracted by the town? Okay, thank you.
Maybe now that you asked that question, I'm just going to open it up to our CAO just to explain what that incurs with a contractor coming in, a private contractor, clean up another contractor's empty lot.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. We do have our manager of community policing in the gallery here, Mark Anderson. He'll be able to give a more detailed explanation of the legislative process and the timelines assigned to the compliance process in the event there's not initial voluntary compliance from the property owner. So if that's okay, if I could get Mark to just provide a general overview on how the timelines work under the MGA and our community standards bylaw.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor. The process for us for an unsightly property complaint, when we take the initial complaint in, we will try a verbal request first. If it doesn't get cleaned up within 7 days, then we proceed into a Municipal Government Act order, which we have to give the property owner 14 days minimum in order to clean up the property. That allows for the appeal process time where they can appeal the order to council. Following the 14 days, if it's not cleaned up, then we can call in our private contractor that the town has a contract with to clean up the individual lots. We do try and work with the property owners verbally and on regular visits to try and get them to gain compliance with the bylaw as opposed to calling in the contracted services, but that's our last option. It generally takes about 21 days unless the owner starts to undertake the cleanup activities, and in which case that puts us on hold. If the owner chooses not to allow us on the property, then it forces us to actually go to court in order to get an injunction to get onto the property to clean it up.
Thank you, Mark. Any more questions, comments for either Mark or Dean? Seeing none, then could I get someone to sponsor a motion that council move to receive the update for information? Further, that council direct administration to report back on the options available to address unsightly concerns on vacant lots in Coaldale. Councillor Beekman makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So once again, Dean, thank you for all your work on this, and this definitely needed to be done, so I appreciate that. Moving on to business arising from the minutes, agenda item 6.1. We have our Director of Recreation and Community Services, Russ Tanner. He'll be presenting on the Southern Alberta Summer Games, giving us an update. Russ, whenever you're ready, your floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for your time. Russ Tanner, the Director of Recreation and Community Services, and just gotta pull this up. Okay, so as you're aware, and I'm hoping the majority of the community is aware that we bid on the 2024 Southern Alberta Summer Games through the Southern Alberta Recreation Association. I wanted to come to council to provide a little bit of an update of where we're at and a little bit of a timeline of what to expect as we move forward. All right, so the first thing we'll go through is a little bit about the host community's main responsibilities. So what will be expected to deliver over the next year. But the first one is we will establish a capable organizational structure, which I'll go through in just a few minutes here as to what we're planning to do. We'll provide a structure that will carry out all the functions of the Southern Alberta Summer Games. We'll provide the necessary facilities and the equipment and the people for the sports and the cultural events and entertainment that happens during the event, the main event. We'll submit a budget and list of all sports and cultural events to a planning and administration committee, which is the Southern Alberta Recreation Association and members of our own team. We'll submit games logos and planning to the same committee, and we'll review the first draft of the rules and regulations. So what happens is these sports and events come to fruition, and we find people that will champion them. We do have the ability to kind of use certain rules and regulations and also kind of create our own, and I'll kind of go through that as we go further, dig deeper into the presentation. Continue on, some more responsibilities that we have will be to keep accurate financial records, and we'll be responsible for the awards and ceremonies and the protocol and presentations that take place during the games. We'll provide sufficient liability insurance. That's already been researched and accounted for the 2024 budget, and you'll see that in the budget. We'll provide the Southern Alberta Rec Association with detailed final reports when it's all said and done. Again, this is an event, a major event that's turned over to each community each and every year, and that information provides the next community and hosts in the future to be able to know what to expect and see. And then we'll provide a detailed participation with all the numbers of the sports and the breakdowns of the ages and categories. So pretty detailed report when all said and done. Yeah, and so here's a little bit of a timeline on what we plan to do here in November. We currently are advertising for the Summer Games coordinator. We'd expect that they'll be advertised for some time here into December. We'll approach partners for support, and these partners are anything from surrounding community organizations, businesses, facilitation of things like we're looking at working with Stafford Lake on some events and things like that. So we'll approach as many partners as we can to get support and participate within. And we're recruiting volunteers. We at the community open house, we started recruiting. We had actually quite a few people put their names forward, and we have since had a number of people contact us for some key positions, which you'll see in just a little bit here. In December, we will look at hiring the Summer Games coordinator and onboarding them in January. And we'll continue recruiting for volunteers. We will we'll then look at in January the volunteer committee finalization, which again I'll show you a little bit of a structure here in a minute, and we'll look at the Summer Games logo. So finalizing that, usually we will be able to create a logo that will be able to incorporate what we feel represents our area, both with the town of Coaldale and the county, Lethbridge County. So we'll have some design opportunities there and some input certainly from council and local partners. So In February, sport lists will be finalized and schedules of events will start to come out so that we'll be able to see the games start to take shape that Wednesday through Saturday. And then in March, we'll finalize the sports and events and details. We'll continue recruiting volunteers. We'll have those champions of each sport and chairs start to recruit their own volunteers. In some cases, they'll bring a number of volunteers with them because they already have associations with them, which you'll see in just a minute. And then in April through June, that's really, we promote the games at that time, we take registration, and then we finalize the tournament schedules, because the tournament schedules will really come down to participation numbers and making sure we get the categories we're hoping for. So here's kind of the here, I'll just bring this over a little bit. Here's kind of the structure. This is the structure, not kind of. This is the structure that we're looking at providing. It's proven and has worked in other communities. But that Summer Games coordinator will have support from town administration, from Recreation and Parks for the facilities and facilitation of many of the events and things like that. Obviously through finance, through communications, and community services. Our community services team will all support that position and their endeavor to kind of be the go-to person. That person then will, and we'll go through a little bit of information on each one of these in just a minute as well, but the key volunteer positions that will work with the Summer Games coordinator will be the social and activities events chair, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. The food services chair, the sports chair, the medical chair, the medals, results, and results center chair person. And so how those break down is, okay, how those break down, the social and activities and events chair is a person that would be looking at the opening and closing ceremonies, programming them, making sure we get the right dignitaries and right program in place. And that is done with volunteers for the most part. And then there's also social events, which you know we'll talk a little more about in just a few more slides. But those are like we are looking at looking at the ability of offering some concerts, having some guest speakers, and having a major event each night of those games. Obviously, the Wednesday night, the opening night, would be the opening ceremonies. But at those opening ceremonies, we very well could, if we are successful in obtaining some grants that we're going after, there could be a concert aspect of it, live entertainment, and some other things that we'll get into. But that's what that chairperson does with their committee, and a little bit of the breakdown of their committee, what it'll look like. And continuing on, we had food services. This one's a pretty simple one, but it's water stations kind of everywhere that time of the year. We have to make sure that everybody stays hydrated, and then concessions and food trucks. And that group will kind of come to, we're hoping obviously in each one of these situations we get somebody that knows that area and understands it, and so they'll come up with some of their own strategies as to where these concessions need to be, where we can use food trucks, where we can use local business, and so forth and so on. Continuing on, we have the medical chair, and this will be, you know, a combination of, in communities past, it's been a combination of EMS and fire department and also some volunteer first aiders, where we're working together and making sure that in some cases they're on standby in certain events that may be higher risk and things like that. So, and continuing on, we have the medals, results, and center chair, and that person that we're looking at running the main office and out of Civic Square here. This would be where people would come for any inquiries or things like that, and also where we'll receive and administer the results for the games from. And quite likely the arts aspect of it and the arts competition, photography competitions and things are usually displayed at that same location, kind of creating a little bit of a hub. And last but not least, but we've got the sports chair, and I'm just going to go through here 3 slides, and the first slide is confirmed events. So this means that we actually have people that have stepped forward or we've reached out to, and they've confirmed that they'll run these events, okay, or these sports. We're just at the sports this time, not totally all the events, but The athletics events, that's track and field, shot put, javelin, all that good stuff. Kate Andrews High School, who they do a number of track and field events in a year. They've told us and committed to that they will run that event for us. The soccer event coordinator will be the Coaldale and District Soccer Group Club. We've got a commitment from them. The pickleball event will be the Coaldale Pickleball Association. The cribbage event coordinator will be the Coaldale Cribbage Club at the Senior Center is what they're planning. And the lacrosse event coordinator will be Lethbridge Lacrosse, who operates quite a large part of their program out here in Coaldale. Golf event coordinator will be Land O'Lakes Golf Club. And continuing on, to interest shown and in conversations with the badminton event, we do have Lethbridge Badminton very much wanting to help out with that. We just are making a connection with our local badminton groups to make sure that they're not overlooked and they're involved as well if they want to be. And then the swimming event coordinator, we are looking at a regional contingent. We don't have a swim club here in Coaldale, and so we are going to have to run this event with cooperation and partnership with some surrounding, and we've had a number of people approach us and say they'd be willing to help us out with that. And so we just need to look at what that means and if we can get our own pool surveyed and sanctioned to be able to be part of a meet, because usually what happens with swim meet is it becomes part of the summer swim rotation within Southern Alberta, where they have swim meets every weekend at different places, and they've always kept open that summer games weekend for whoever hosts. So we've had a group from Lethbridge, Tabor, and even Raymond all suggested they'd be willing to help us out. So flag football event coordinator, we are looking and talking with Spartans football, just waiting to get a confirmation that they'll do it. I know that there's individuals with them that are wanting to do it. We'll just try to do it through them so that they can promote their programs as well. We have 3-on-3 basketball event coordinators. Also, Kate Andrews High School is certainly willing to step up and do that with the basketball program. Weightlifting event coordinator, we have Twisted Still Fitness. Jordan has suggested that he'd love to do that. And this is an event that could very well, we did put it under the sports. It could be either that or it could be a demonstration opportunity as well, but we'll work on the details of that as we continue on. And then the events that we're still looking for partnership with, and I'm not too worried about too many of them. Some of them will depend on whether or not we run the event. And that happens every year in any host community where sometimes they don't have. Equestrian's one that we've dug pretty deep and haven't heard back from anybody, so you don't see that on the list. That's not to say that if somebody were to come forward that we wouldn't, but there are a number of disciplines in equestrian that depend on the area and their willingness to run a tournament at that time frame. And at this point, people we've approached have turned it down at this point. But ball hockey event, we'll find somebody for that one. We're looking to make a connection locally here. Baseball event coordinator, 5 and 10K run event coordinator, the beach volleyball event coordinator. Which we don't have a beach volleyball pit yet, but that's an opportunity that, say, if Stafford Lake or ourselves, we will look at the costs for creating one and could become something you'd call like a legacy type situation where they then would have that venue and facility for years to come to be used. So those are some things we're researching. Archery event coordinator, photography, water sport event coordinator, and again, this is also one that could either be a demonstration sport or could actually we could take it right into a sport depending on who champions that. And same thing with mountain biking. You'll see a little bit later on that one as well. It could be either or. All right, so this isn't the first time you will have seen this budget, but I do have some good news that the community host grant, athletics grant, is a little bit higher than what we anticipated initially. We anticipated $15,000. It is going to be $17,000. That's committed monies that the Southern Alberta Recreation Association gives to the host community, and so we haven't adjusted that in the expenses yet, but you'll see just a slight difference there, just reflecting that the grant is a little more than what we anticipated. But yeah, this goes through, I won't go through too much in detail, but it's just showing that there's a number of areas and divisions broke down everything from, like we mentioned earlier, from insurance to equipment to the sports themselves and the equipment they'll require to putting on the event. And the big one's the referees, officials within the events. That's where a lot of the funds end up going to. All right. So there's more opportunities than just providing sporting events when it comes to community. It is a festival. It is considered a festival. It's always had that kind of status. So we are looking at grant opportunities for festivals that could very well see us bring in a concert for like the Friday night. And so we are certainly looking at those opportunities, and then also these demonstration sports. We are talking and already have somewhat confirmed. Just need to work out the details with a walking soccer game event that'll take place during the games, as well as demonstration sport. And like I said, water sports and mountain biking are also on the list as well. And then guest speakers. We always look at trying to get somebody that that can come, especially during the opening ceremonies and sometimes the closing ceremonies, to actually speak to the athletes about. And there's actually been quite a few athletes that have participated in the Southern Alberta Summer Games that have gone on to be professionals, that have gone on to win Olympic medals and things like that in other communities. We're searching out those people for this area and hoping to bring them in and make them a part of it. All right. Are there questions?
Thank you, Russ. Russ, for your presentation. I just have a couple of questions before I open it up to council. So can you give us an update on at the new school? Will the field be ready?
And just to clarify, you're talking the outdoor field?
Yes.
The outdoor field, it's not likely it will. And I only say that because with my knowledge, and it may be lack of knowledge just because I haven't been in any meetings that have suggested that the design for that is quite ready. I believe that there's a appetite to try to get a number of different organizations involved with the Palliser School Division on what that will look like and what materials will be used, and I haven't heard back as to the design there.
So for some of the athletic events, will it be having to host those at other locations in Lethbridge, or is there locations in Coldale? Like the dry sports, I know they'll be in the rec center, but the outdoor.
So the Kate Andrews, current Kate Andrews High School has a track that we would use for those track and field events.
And the regulation length of that track is?
So because it's grassroots and doesn't feed Alberta games, it doesn't have to be surveyed there. Whereas the swim event does play into other qualifications. So there are certain sports within the Southern Alberta Summer Games that still feed and qualify them for other competition that would require regulation and surveys to make sure athletics is not one any longer.
And then for the indoor dry sports, as far as where people are going to sit, because we don't have any bleachers as of yet, do we?
So for the future recreation center,
Yeah.
Mayor? Yeah. We plan to have tip and roll bleachers in place. If we get the go ahead on that budget item, we do have enough time to be able to get those in place. The other thing is we do also have some of these events we anticipate will take place in the new high school gymnasium as well, and they'll have bleachers. But we'll have an opportunity to make sure that there are seats and opportunity for spectators to be where they need to be.
Okay.
So if I could just clarify, aside from the swim meet not being confirmed yet, if we chose to, we have the facilities to host every sporting event that we've listed on the list locally here in Coldale. We may still host the swim event here, but we also have an option of surrounding communities if we needed to go elsewhere to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to members of council. Any questions, comments for Russ? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Russ, for this in-depth presentation on the Summer Games. Really helps us enlighten what we're looking forward to for the coming year. Two questions for you, Russ. Number one is, with these ceremonies and that, will there be a grand opening of the rec facility during those events?
So for clarification, make sure I understood the question correctly. You're asking if the grand opening of the recreation center will take place at the same time as the Southern Alberta Summer Games? I've not thought of that myself. I haven't thought of that option. And so aside from me making that decision, which I wouldn't on my own, I'd have to say that if that's a suggestion, it's certainly one we can entertain. What I can tell you is we're told that we should be able to be in the facility by the 1st of May of that year. So that will be 2 months ahead of the games taking place. And so that would certainly be something that council would want to factor into their decision as to where they would like to see the grand opening take place.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. I think we'd leave that to council to make that clarification in that direction for administration to follow. But I'd definitely like to see that become part of the grand opening of our rec facility and showcase it to the world is really where I'm at with that thought. My second question to you, Russ, and just an observation, a micro question more than anything, disc golf or frisbee golf as some call it. I know that people over the past number of years have asked me about producing that sport here in Coaldale, and although we don't have the facility for it, it might be something that the games group might want to consider.
That is a very good question. What I can tell you that you are correct that disc golf has become somewhat popular lately, and we weren't prepared for 2024, but we do have our foreman of park services is a past golf course superintendent, and he is, when he has time, which he hasn't had a lot of yet, but he is actually designing an option to come to council for disc golf. I don't foresee that happening prior to the Southern Alberta Summer Games. And the current 3 holes that we have probably wouldn't draw enough attention to that. But that is, stay tuned. That's a good leadway into something I believe council will see in the next year as a proposal.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments for Russ? So once again, thank you for putting that together and giving us the update. I'm looking for someone to make a motion that that council receive the Southern Alberta Summer Games update as information. Councillors or Deputy Mayor Saylor, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7.1 under bylaws and policies, we have a land use bylaw amendment 880-P-11-23 regarding first reading, and we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. Cam, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Van Rijn, Council. What we have before you is a proposal to amend the land use bylaw, so bylaw 880-P-1123. And the proposal is fundamentally to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the childcare facility zoning to be added, or childcare facility use to be added to several zonings within that bylaw, specifically highway commercial C2, industry I, and light industry I2. As the report states, as the town of Coaldale continues to grow, so too does demand for locally accessible childcare. Currently, the land use bylaw does not allow for childcare facilities within the C2 district or the industry or industry 2 district. And in order to encourage the integration of additional childcare throughout the community, administration is requesting consideration of the amendment. To provide some further context to that, we have been working with a number of prospective investors who have shown interest in developing childcare facilities in the town of Coaldale. One of the things that stands out for us administratively is that there is only one true childcare facility in the town. That is a Child's Pace, which is located out in the east end of town towards Casey's pub and the hotel. They are, in speaking with them, they are currently oversubscribed. It's not a large childcare facility. It's in the under 50 student or 50 children group, and the wait list obviously fluctuates on a day-to-day basis, but sits around 2 years wait list to get in, and of course a 2-year wait list. It's fair to assume that there are a number of people that don't bother putting themselves on a 2-year wait list. They simply find other opportunities in Lethbridge or elsewhere. Increasing the capacity for childcare is something that a lot of municipalities are doing. The city of Lethbridge is currently considering beyond something like this, actually creating an incentive potentially to see these types of facilities constructed, recognizing the important value that childcare facilities provide to a community as well as to the economy of a community. And so administratively, when we're looking at the fact that Coaldale is now a town of over 9,000 people, the fact that we're likely to be growing at a fairly good clip over the next few years from terms of residential growth, considering also the fact that we're a younger than average community with an average age of well below the provincial average and the national average, and that average comes from the fact that we have a lot of young families located in our community. We need to make sure that we're keeping up with that, especially considering the number of jobs we know from the McCain's investments and other investments that are coming. They're going to be coming to the community, and childcare is intrinsically tied to that sort of thing. So in order to get ahead of that, we're taking a look at this as an opportunity to allow potentially free markets to help address that problem for us. Right now, childcare facilities are allowed fundamentally in the institutional district, which is largely public land, which is where the facility in the rec center comes into play. But again, we don't forecast that the capacity for that facility will exceed the demand in the community, far from it. In addition to that, basically the C1 zoning, which is the downtown commercial zoning, and the C3 zoning, which is a very limited in scope zoning. The only building I can think of that has the C3 zoning is where Ming's is located next to the grocery store. So it's not a zoning that's used very commonly. The highway commercial district zoning does not allow for childcare facilities as a discretionary use at this point. Most of the available commercial land in the community is that C2 zoning. And the industry and light industry land use districts are an important consideration too. I realize at first glance the idea of childcare in an industrial facility is perhaps off-putting, and it's certainly council's prerogative to consider those. But when you look at if you look at Lethbridge, for example, there are 2 facilities within the W.T. Hill Park, Ruse 100-acre Wood, and Serendipity Childcare. I believe I have those names correct. Both of those facilities are full to capacity, and both are relatively large. There are opportunities for consideration for those types of facilities in those areas. When you consider industrial parks, consider that the land value is substantially lower, which means that you can buy an acre for the cost of a quarter acre of commercial land, the potential to potentially develop relatively useful outdoor spaces on those or larger facilities. They won't be for everyone. They wouldn't be a choice that everyone would make in terms of where to bring their child. But from our perspective, administratively, we believe that there's likely an opportunity for 2, 3, 4, 5 additional childcare facilities in town, even considering what's coming with the rec facility. And we want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunity for interested investors to find a suitable parcel of land to bring forward a development application for consideration at the MPC level, which is what is being proposed here, is we're always proposing these to be a discretionary use. With that, our recommendation is that council provide first reading of Land Use Bylaw Amendment 880P1123, and furthermore that a public hearing date be set at November 23rd at 5:20 p.m.
Thank you, Cameron. I'll open it up to members of council. Any questions for our presenter? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And speaking in favor of first reading, I would just want to ask one question to you, Cam. The whole philosophy behind the childcare center or spaces in these areas that you're proposing is the option that employees can drop their children off at a close by location, proceed to work, spend their day at work, pick them up after work without much hesitation, and be able to go home from there. Is that kind of the assumption that I'm making, or correct assumption, I should say?
Particularly as it relates to the industry district. Industry 2, I think there's 3 lots in town. So realistically, the way Coaldale's bylaw fundamentally works is we don't have as many zonings as say in Lethbridge, where there'd be multiple industrial zonings. We tend to have one, and then we tend to make decisions on a case-by-case basis within that zoning. And so the idea within that zoning is to say, well, we recognize that perhaps not every lot in the industrial park is appropriate for this use. There's certainly some that would be worthy of consideration. For that there are advantages to it. Certainly, as I mentioned, the ability to have more space at a more reasonable price, and second of all, the fact that it certainly makes commutes easier for people that are working in those areas.
Councillor Avery has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for my own clarity, would that public hearing be set for November 27th, the same night as council?
Thank you. Yeah, and in fact, Haley had emailed me about that and told me to make that change in my speaking notes, and then I totally forgot. So there you go.
Thank you, Councillor Avery. Councillor Pickering has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Cam. So what you're looking for is for us to have a public reading on changing the zoning. So would that include down by the dental center there where McDonald's is, so that you could build one there? Is that what you're after?
So thank you for the question. So what we're talking about is not changing any zonings, but rather adding uses within zoning. So we're not talking about rezoning any particular parcel. So there are lots within town that have the C2 zoning. So everything around the RCMP area is the C2 zoning, so childcare would not be allowed there currently. The lot in between Fast Gas and KFC is currently C2, so it would not allow childcare there. I believe the lot next to the dental center is C1. I believe there are 2 C1 lots for sale in the community, and that is fundamentally part of the issue, right? If there are only 2 lots that are ever for sale, and those lots are not being sold at a price point that's reasonable, or if the owner is simply holding and waiting for another opportunity, it fundamentally turns off the tap in terms of our availability. So from our perspective, opening up more potential lots for consideration allows for market forces to help address this problem for us.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any further questions, so I'm looking for someone to make a motion that council provide first reading of Land Use Bylaw Amendment 880-P-11-23 and set the public hearing date and time as November 27th, 2023 at 5:20 p.m. Councillor Pickering makes that motion. Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. Moving on to new business agenda item 8.1, service request management. We have our asset manager, Tim Kova, presenting. Tim, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for your time tonight. This is an information update to Council. Just letting you know that we have reconfigured the service request module, and we're making a second attempt at using this centralized platform to receive and manage all service requests. Some of the advantages of using a centralized platform is there's more increased transparency. It's easier to relay information between parties. It's easier to transfer tasks, and all the comments and notes on every request is stored in a central location. What will be different the second time around is that we will have procedures in place to monitor unassigned requests. All the users of the system have agreed upon their roles and their specific responsibilities. There's proper oversight of the system to make sure that everything's working as it's intended. And also service request management ties into asset management because it forms part of the bigger picture of developing a service level framework for the town. So with that said, there's some key dates here that I've included in the staff report. Staff have already begun using the service request module to start documenting service requests. And this is just to get staff sort of retrained, or any new staff, get them trained on how to use the system. On December 1st, we'll activate the link on the Town of Coaldale website so that residents can submit their own requests through the website. And then January 1st, we'll announce that that link is active on the website, and we'll develop some sort of communication strategy, or a way of letting the residents know that this is now active and they can submit requests online. And with that, I will turn it over to council, and there are 2 decision options there presented.
Thank you, Tim. Can you just give us, excuse me, a Reader's Digest version of how this used to be handled?
Okay, so do you mean like before the service request module? Or I guess the service request module was intended so that service requests were, so that there was more of a structure and formal procedures in place for dealing with service requests. So if a resident comes in, say their wheel is broken on their bin, what's the process that's followed before? You know, it might be a phone call, it might be an email, or the person might be in the office, you might just tell them in person. But the purpose of this is it's all within the software. You want to create the service request, so it's documented, the date you created it, what the issue is, who requested it, and then you want to be able to, you know, track that request through to completion, and to be able to just have that in a centralized place so that anybody picking up on that request can see where the status is, what's been done on it, and there's no, it eliminates a lot of the questions, the back and forth, where's the information for this? It's all in the centralized location.
Thank you for that. I'll open it up to council. Any questions for our presenter? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'll make a motion that council accept this report as information.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Reese. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 8.2, request for council support regarding an ACP grant application for Lethbridge County. And I don't see Justin in the gallery, so I believe our CAO will present on that. Go ahead, Kaylin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm presenting on behalf of our Director of Operational Services. So what you see here, I'll be brief. This is a request from our neighbors to pass a letter of support. Lethbridge County is or has applied for an Alberta Community Partnership Grant to examine the Regional Waste Commission and also to look at other regional waste solutions that may or may not include Coaldale, but as a courtesy, they asked if we wanted to pass a letter of support so that we could be part of the discussion to see to what extent, if any, Coaldale might factor into any of the regional solutions that their consultant identifies.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll open it up to members of council. Any questions, comments for our CAO? Pretty straightforward. With that being said, I'm looking for someone to make a motion that the request for council support regarding the ACP grant application for Lethbridge County under the Alberta Community Partnership Program for Regional Solid Waste Study Project. Someone care to sponsor that? Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8.3, the request for council support regarding the AMWWP grant application for potable water reservoir project. And we have our manager of infrastructure, Dustin Yankee, presenting. Dustin, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This will be another quick and brief item. Just looking for a resolution from council to support a grant application to the AMWWP program. It's the Alberta Water and Waste Partnership Program. If you recall, last year we were successful in getting $525,000 towards our potable water reservoir project. And the intent of this application is to apply for the remainder of the project. Based off of current projections, if we are successful in this application, we would anticipate $3,494,000. That's based off current population numbers, so it is subject to change based off what number the province uses. But essentially, this is more of an administrative item for council to approve so that we can attach to our grant application. Happy to answer any questions that relate to the project.
Thank you, Dustin. Councillor Avery has a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dustin. So the grant is based on population, not on this estimated $11 million figure. Is that correct?
Sorry, just to, I guess, clarify, might have confused that. The percentage of the total cost of the project that they fund is based off the population. So the 36.21%, that number was derived based off our population. So if you're a smaller municipality, you're eligible to get more funding towards your project. So it's still based off the 11 million, but it's only that 36%.
Okay, and so how accurate is the estimate? Are we going to find that it's millions of dollars under budget when we go to tender this project, or are we feeling confident in that?
We're still feeling confident. We're getting further along with design, but there's still quite a bit of detailed design to get through, and some unknowns with site conditions, etc. once construction starts. So there's never a guarantee, but based off where we're at with design right now, we're still comfortable with that number.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments for our presenter? Seeing none, could I get someone to sponsor a motion that council direct administration to submit a funding application under the Alberta Water Wastewater Partnership Program for the town of Coaldale's potable water reservoir and pump station project, and that council commit to its proportionate share of funding for this critical piece of infrastructure? Councillor Reese makes a motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. Moving on to departmental reports under agenda item 9.1, we have our financial update Q3 up to September 30th, 2023. And we have our Chief Financial Officer and Deputy CAO, Kyle Beauchamp, presenting. Kyle, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks and good evening, Council. So we do have the Q3 September 30th, 2023 financial update for you. This is kind of the similar format that we have presented in the past. So what we'll first do here is essentially look at our income statement. So how this reads is going, again, usually from left to right. We have the actual balance. So revenues at the top, expenses at the bottom, actual balance as of September 30th, followed by the budget that was previously approved by council, and the remaining budget and some commentary as to where we expect those figures to end at the end of the year. Again, these are kind of our best guesses based on the data we have now, but it gives us a fairly close estimate to where we're going to be in another 3 months here on a financial statement wise. So I'll briefly go through the revenue expenses here. Property tax revenue, we did have higher supplemental property taxes, so we do expect an additional $30,000 in revenue. Utilities and user fees, $85,000 surplus expected due to higher water use, so that's a higher use and consumption. That is offset by $40,000 deficit in our water supply and distribution, because when you do have higher water consumption, the revenue for the town does go up, but our associated expenses from purchasing the water also goes up. User fees, sales and goods and services. Same before, expectation that the fire department will generate a surplus of $90,000 from the wildfire calls that were happening in northern Alberta and support provided earlier this summer. Franchise fees, this isn't necessarily a franchise fee, but Fortis, when they install their streetlights throughout town for new development, the town and developer is responsible for the portion of the cost of that streetlights. As those streetlights generate electricity and revenue for Fortis, if that exceeds a certain threshold that they set, we essentially get the portion of or the construction amount returned back as the electricity generates a higher than expected revenue for Fortis. Operating grants, we do expect to have approximately $90,000 in surplus, $65,000 from our MSI operating, which did double, and $25,000 from other miscellaneous grants, such as the library operating grant from the provincial government. Fines and penalties, $115,000 surplus expected from there. Investment income, as well as another $50,000 surplus due to higher rates that are tied to prime. As with the prime rates increasing, we did have some high revenues there. And then license permits and fees, approximately a $40,000. Actually, sorry, this number is expected to be right on budget. So this $40,000 deficit, I believe this is an old comment that I should have taken out, but we do expect this number to be right on budget. Moving down to our expenses, just touching base on a few high points here. Our policing costs at the end of the year, $55,000 deficit. I believe when we reported this to council last time, this was around $100,000. We did find some areas where essentially we were getting overbilled for some accommodation costs that we went back to the RCMP and were able to get some funds clawed back. In the roads, streets, walks, and lighting pathway here, we're going to have an expense for $175,000 for rail maintenance for the intersection at 11th Street here. That should be completed by the end of the year. Essentially on that is for any rail crossing that was completed after the rail was installed, the town is responsible for the cost and maintenance of those intersections. The 11th Street one is the only one that meets that criteria within town. This was one that kind of came out of the blue for us. We didn't anticipate this coming. CP Rail told us that it no longer met the standards, and we were responsible for 100% of the cost. Along with, moving on to the next item here, $75,000 deficit for some debt servicing costs. These are funds that we had budgeted as part of the loan on the land that we have for the Northwest land. We were anticipating these and have a funding source from our land sale reserve. It's just not within the operating budget. And finally, the one I'll touch base on here is the operational costs for the new lagoons. This was an item that there was some uncertainty at last budget as to what the actual operating costs for these will be. The cost for chemical, power, and staff overtime have been significantly higher than expected. So we do expect these costs to be $215,000 higher to operate the facility. That's also an item that we expect to see an increase in budget there going forward, just based on having been in the facility now for approximately 6-7 months. Our operations team is starting to see what the cost for running that facility is more realistic at. So the bottom line for the operational budget here, we are projecting a surplus of $315,000 as of September 30th. Next page here, this is just expenses by object. So on the first page here, you see expenses are all broken down by category. So administration, police, fire, operations. We're just showing you this in a different avenue here, broken down. The only other of note here is surplus from various staff vacancies that we did have during the year of $150,000 anticipated. Moving on to the capital budget, there has been no changes in any of the approved budgets or capital programs here as displayed from Q2. And there hasn't really been any change from what we've previously communicated to Council in the past 2 quarters. Most of the projects that you do see here have either been completed or expected to be completed by the end of the year. Majority of them on budget with minimal variance that hasn't already been communicated to Council or the budget has been updated previously. With that being said, I'd be happy to go into these with any further detail, with any questions Council may have, but I'll turn it back to Council for any further questions.
Thank you, Kyle, for your usual in-depth report. We appreciate that. I'll open it up to members of Council for any questions, comments. Councillor Beekman has a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kyle, for the presentation and a couple of points there where you were able to find a few avenues of saving and claw back a little bit. Just so I'm clear, maybe I was confused and didn't hear it quite good enough. So that 215,000 overage on the wastewater lagoons operations, that's expected to be, that's not a one-off, that's a year-over-year where we should be expecting now?
So that figure largely, excuse me, relates to 2 items. The first is the actual chemical that is required to operate the facility. That was an item that in budget discussions last year, there was some uncertainty from administration as to what it would require to operate that facility. And we knew that there was going to be more, but we didn't have a good expectation as to the actual level of chemical needed to run that facility. And the actual amount is approximately, like for this year, for the budget coming up, it's going to be about $175,000 we predict a year to run that. And the power cost, we did anticipate higher power cost. I believe in last year we had anticipated around $130,000. And that's coming closer to that 160,000. So to summarize that up, the utilities, we do expect that to go up a bit, minimal compared to everything else. But the big kicker here is the actual chemical cost. That's an item that, to be frank, when we had the budget from operations, I think we had like 10 grand for chemical historical average. Based on the old facility, that goes up to about 175,000 with the new facility. So I've been talking to the operations team, seeing what kind of alternatives that we have and whatnot. And it seems like the treatment that we're using right now is the best solution, that the best and most efficient and most cost-effective solution for that facility going forward. So for as part of the operating budget next year, the costs for the sewer will be higher when you see that in the package. That's largely because of those 2 items.
Thank you. So I'll open it up again for Council. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that Council receive the Q3 financial update as information? Councillor Chapman makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Kyle, to you and your team for putting that together. Moving on to correspondence under agenda item 11.1. We have a letter from Adam Parker. And I'm just going to ask Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth Investment, just to come and sit down for a minute and maybe a little bit of background on that letter. Everybody had a chance to read the letter that Adam submitted, and that was regarding the application for the 8-plex. And if, Cameron, not to put you on the spot, maybe if you could just enlighten us what we should be doing with this. I spoke with our CAO, and I'm going to be reaching out to Adam so that we can have a sit-down discussion to see how this impacted the residents. And I think their biggest complaint was on how they found out and the timelines of how they found out. So maybe if you could touch on that a little bit for me, please, Cameron.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Happy to do so. Yeah, so as far as that particular rezoning, we treat it the same as we treat any other rezoning. And so administration with respect to these circulations follows the communication policy with respect to these things that's approved by council. And so we have a circulation that goes out by letter, provides all of the information that meets the requirements of the Municipal Government Act, letting folks know that the rezoning is coming, providing them with an opportunity to contact us for further questions and information. And that's something that happens fairly frequently. So we include email addresses and telephone numbers and all of the rest of that. And generally speaking, that is how people, if they want to follow up and understand something more clearly, providing them the opportunity to do so. There's nothing necessarily preventing administration from expanding the radius, for example, of notifications. There are pluses and minuses to doing any of that. There's a cost associated with mail, for example. And the vast majority of these types of notices we sent out get virtually no feedback, right? And so we can certainly do that. With respect to some of the comments made, there are certain things that I think would have fairly substantial implications for the town. In addition to the most serious potentially being the idea of extending a waiting period for an additional 16 days. We have approached our sort of growth and investment model is based around the idea of providing investors in our community with a lean, low red tape, easy to do business approach, and dragging on the process for additional weeks because some people don't like to check their mail regularly is a fairly substantial ask in my opinion, but there's nothing preventing us from doing that. And the other thing I would suggest that needs some consideration is the concept of sort of using plain language in these notices. So the reason we use the language we use in the notices is because that is the language that is standard within the industry and meets the requirements of the Municipal Government Act. The problem with plain language is that it is open to significant interpretation. And what we find typically is that we're happy to use plain language to discuss issues when we have an opportunity to work with someone directly. So if someone comes into the office and wants to talk about it, I'm not necessarily going to use technical language, but to use non-technical language in a mail out that is open for interpretation, and then perhaps people can read it, and that causes sort of rumor and innuendo to result from it. What we really want people to do is if they want to learn more about the project, they have an opportunity to, myself and my staff take great pride in being sort of friendly and open. I'm happy to talk to people during the evenings. I meet with people in this very office after normal work hours. We're happy to accommodate that. But the notices are a formal document. We want to make sure that we use language that's befitting that sort of formal notice. But that being said, making changes to the communication policy is something that we can certainly do from time to time. And if council wants us to consider certain changes in line with Mr. Parker's request, we're obviously happy to bring that forward to a future meeting of council for your consideration.
Thank you for that excellent explanation. So would it be fair to ask, is it possible to come up with some suggestions that based on this letter and the discussions, myself and other members of council spoke with some of the affected residents as well, that we can maybe, like you used the term, the red tape, to help with that. Is that a possibility?
Certainly, thank you. Certainly a possibility. The other thing, in addition to the idea of making changes to the communication policy, one of the things we've touched on a little bit in some of our discussions is some of the changes that might potentially be coming forward, proposals for council that have to do with our submission to the federal government for access to the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is a potential fund of the federal. You might have heard of federal government initiatives providing, I think Kelowna was announced for $30 million last week, for example, and things like that to help get housing built. And that's tied to the municipality making some changes to some of their policies generally for reducing red tape. So we could potentially have something come to council in the spring that has to do with infill development, which is obviously what we were talking about at this particular meeting. And we might, in a policy like that, provide for additional requirements for administration or for the developer themselves to engage in a certain amount of public engagement prior to coming to council, which we find is generally fairly effective. But as far as recommendations for what we might consider, just looking at this here, providing. I would have to learn how to do QR codes. I'll say that first of all. It's not something I understand how they work, but I don't understand how to build them. But certainly, providing for opportunities like that, we want to make sure that we balance. Again, coming back to the idea of sort of a lean staffing model. So I wouldn't recommend with the sort of creating for every single rezoning application that comes forward together. If we're creating, several hours of work for the people that are putting these together, then that's probably something we want to be cautious of just because we have a fairly lean staffing component. But certainly the easiest thing to do is increasing potential circulation radiuses from this recommendation from 60 meters to 150. And we might want to consider that with specific guidelines for when, for example, so when it's a rezoning within an established residential neighborhood or something like that to provide that level of guidance to staff. That'd be something we'd be happy to do. I might suggest that that's probably something we could tackle early in the new year.
Thank you, Cameron. And I'm just going to ask our CAO, we spoke briefly on this today as well. Do we need a direction to administration out of this letter? Like one of the options that came up was that council direct to put together infill guideline checklist consistent with the municipal development plan that helps standard the steps followed by future infill investors in the future. Does that cover that off?
That would be certainly a reasonable thing to do. I might suggest that we wait for feedback on the Housing Accelerator Fund prior, because that will, if we make these changes and then 3 weeks later the Housing Accelerator Fund says we need to do something slightly different, it would be sort of a inefficient use of time. We expect to hear back from that in the next month or two, but I think that would be a reasonable thing to tackle.
Yes, we won't put a timeline on this, we'll just put it in the queue.
Yeah.
So. Any further discussion, comments on this to our presenter? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and fully endorse your suggestions that you're presenting forward. And just a one question I do have towards for Mr. Mills, if I may. Just reading through one of the paragraphs here talking about 60 meters of the affected location. My question to you would be about density, and if that really affects an awful lot of what your response level could be when there is a situation that comes up that you need to provide information to landowners, being that you could have a location where there might be, one home or one lot that might be affected within 60 meters, or you could have 10 or 20 homes with a number of homeowners in there that might be affected as well. So density could be a consideration that you might want to look at.
Absolutely. So my recommendation with respect to this is to have regulations that, rather than trying to solve specific solutions to every problem, which are great in the sense that they're very specific, but they also create, they also tend to be very time consuming. And so you want to find the balance with these regulations of saying, yes, we understand that certain cases are different than others, but also we want Haley in this instance to be able to put this together relatively quickly because she has many things to do.
Okay, thank you. So I'll repeat the suggested motion, if anybody cares to sponsor that council direct to put together an infill guidelines checklist consistent with the municipal development plan that helps standard standardize the steps followed by future infill investors in the future. Anybody care to sponsor that? Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. Moving on to information items. We have the Town of Coaldale 2024 calendar that our municipal clerk put together. It'll be an excellent resource for members of council and our community as a whole. So if there's no questions, comments on that, could I get someone to make a motion that council receive the Town of Coaldale 2024 calendar as information? Councillor Beekman. Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then we have the, under agenda item 12.2, the summary of 2023-2024 council appointed boards and committees we went through on our organizational meeting. Any questions, comments on that one? If not, then I could get someone to make a motion that council receive the 2023 council appointed boards and committees summary as information. Who cares to make that motion? Councillor Pickering. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then we have correspondence from Municipal Affairs, under agenda item 12.4, the Deputy Premier of Alberta, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Minister Mike Ellis. Does someone care to make a motion to receive the Municipal Affairs correspondence as information? Councillor Reese. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then the last item is the Coaldale Public Library, the November to December newsletter and calendar under agenda item 12.5. Any questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion that council receive the Coaldale Public Library newsletter and calendar as information? Councillor Beekman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And that concludes the open portion of our meeting. For anybody that's in our gallery that's here for the Citizens on Patrol meeting, that's going to be following this at 7 o'clock. We're going to go into closed session now. So we'll need you to leave council chambers, and we'll reconvene with the Citizens on Patrol at 7 p.m. With members of council that are on that committee. So again, thank you. That concludes the open portion. We'll take a 10-minute break. Just before we do that, I got to back up to under information items, agenda item 12.3, the summary of the 2023-2024 Citizen Committee appointments. I missed to bring that one up. I apologize for that. So I need a motion that council receive the 2023-2024 Citizen Committee appointment summary as information. Anybody care to sponsor that one? Okay, Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion on that one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And now that we're moving into closed session, I will need a motion that council move to go into closed session at 6:35 p.m. in accordance with section 197-4-B of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for items 13.1, 13.2, and 13.4, subject to section 16, business interests of a third party, items 13.2, 13.3, and 13.4, subject to section 17, personal privacy, and items 13.2 and 13.4, subject to Section 25, economic and other interests of a public body. Who cares to sponsor that motion to go into closed session? Councillor Saylor at 6:36 p.m. Thank you. 10-minute break.